Okay, kids, a little sun there. We're continuing with chapter 6. We left off, let's see, okay, the general says, well, as you heard, that was the president. He wants to see you right away, but first he wants us to try a little experiment. He wants both the young lady here and then your friend Billy to put on the tennis shoes and see if they can levitate. Both should have about the same size feet. Jimmy sat down and took his shoes off. The lady then put them on. Just imagine yourself floating in the air, said Jimmy. She closed her eyes and was obviously concentrating. A moment went by, but nothing. Keep trying, Jimmy said. Suddenly, she was not only floating about 2 feet off the ground, but twirling around too. Oh, this is wonderful, she said. I always wanted to be a ballerina. Okay, your turn, young man, the general said to Billy. Billy had no trouble taking off and immediately flew around the room. I've been waiting and waiting to do this, he said to Jimmy as he landed. The general picked up the phone, hit the speakerphone, and called the president. All systems go, Mr. President, he said. Complete success, sir. Wonderful, said the president. I was afraid there was some strange psychic link between the shoes and Jimmy, so that only he could operate them, in which case they would have been useless to us. Tell Jimmy to put the shoes back on. We'll have a new pair ready for him when he gets here. Jimmy looked really crestfallen. He realized that his fun was quickly coming to an end. The government was going to confiscate his shoes, and that would be that. Major Flynn immediately noticed Jimmy's sadness. He put his arm around him. Hey, cheer up, kid. Maybe the new shoes will be magic too. The major immediately realized that was the worst thing he could have said, as Jimmy started to tear up. He then whispered in Jimmy's ear, Don't worry, I'll think of something. You'll get your shoes back. Major Flynn knew he was promising the moon, with no way he could ever deliver. But Jimmy did brighten at his words of comfort, even though he knew it was virtually impossible that Major Flynn could ever keep his promise. Jimmy was a person of great enthusiasm and had always had a zest for life. He was interested in all kinds of things, from sports to science to politics. He knew he would always have things to occupy his mind. Nothing was going to keep him down for long, and who knows, maybe the major would find a way to get his shoes back. 2 town cars were sent from the White House to pick them up. Each car had a Secret Service driver and an escort. Everyone was warmly received by the president's staff on arrival and ushered into the Oval Office. The president shook hands with them all and said how pleased he was that everything had been resolved and that the country would be eternally grateful for Jimmy's sacrifice. He said his guests would spend the night, and tomorrow they'd be given a tour of the White House and then the city before returning home. The whole time the president was talking, he seemed slightly preoccupied. Perhaps he was just thinking about all the innovations the power in the magic shoes would bring to mankind. Speaking of which, an aide brought in a brand new pair of sneakers for Jimmy and then placed the old sneakers in the now empty shoebox from the new pair. He wrote something on the box and gave it to 2 armed Marines to transport to a place called Groom Lake, Nevada, Area 51. At least that is what Jimmy thought he heard someone say. Now we start chapter 7. Check the time. Okay. Chapter 7, A Ghostly Encounter. I think this is, probably won't be time to read the whole chapter in this session. Jimmy's room was going to be the Lincoln bedroom, as the president had promised earlier, and Jimmy was quite looking forward to it. Not that he expected to see Lincoln's ghost, but just to absorb the sheer history of it would be a memory he'd never forget. By the time bedtime came, Jimmy was so tired he fell asleep almost as soon as his head hit the pillow. But about 3 in the morning, something woke him up. The room was quite dark, but he thought he saw the figure of a man sitting at a writing desk on the other side of the room. Indeed, as he looked, the man half turned towards him. He was dressed in those old-fashioned clothes of over 100 years ago. Jimmy's eyes grew big as he realized that it was the great man himself, and looking as solid as you or me. He slowly got up and walked to Jimmy's bedside and sat in a chair near the foot of the bed. He stared intently at Jimmy, making him quite nervous. After all, ghosts didn't exist. Finally, he spoke in a very strong voice. "Welcome to the White House. I've been expecting you." "Thank you, Mr. President," was all Jimmy could think to say. He then swallowed hard. President Lincoln continued on in a most matter-of-fact manner, as though what was happening was quite a normal situation. "Many people think I'm dead," he said. "What do you think?" Oh, Jimmy replied quickly. "You seem quite alive to me, sir. But I thought you were dead." "Ah, you see, isn't that just the way of it? They see you fall down from a gunshot wound and immediately jump to conclusions." "But, sir, I don't mean to be rude, but even if you didn't die from the assassination attempt, you'd certainly be dead by now. I mean, look, you look exactly at the age you were in your printed images. You must be going on 200 years old." "True indeed, my young man. I was born on February 12th, 1809. But you see, people don't really die. They just make a sort of transition and can remain whatever age they wish. Only the people left behind perceive them as dead. After all, they have the dead body of the person there. What else are they to think?" Jimmy was getting caught up in the moment and was becoming quite curious. "Why can't we see all the people we thought of as dead walking around then, and visiting us as you are right now?" Oh, time's up. Okay, I'll try and continue in a minute. Let's turn it off.